Hey everyone, it's Ehan here. Today we're going to be speaking with Mira Wattar. She's the founder of Wattar Digital. Mira used to lead marketing departments at companies like Hyundai and Fujitsu. She's currently based out of California and previously lived in NYC and Dubai. Like I said, she's currently the founder of Wattar Digital, a highly specialized boutique agency focused around B2B lead gen on LinkedIn and doing also content strategy. Her agency serves a wide variety of clients from startups to enterprise level. Mira, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's dive into it. Before we begin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I have a big background in all things marketing. My company now specializes in LinkedIn B2B lead gen and content strategy specifically.
Okay, awesome. So how would you go about setting up a new stream of new business on LinkedIn? Like what's the process or the secret sauce around that?
So first, you want to identify your target market. And then your goal is to reach out, start a conversation geared at getting them into a meeting with you. So LinkedIn is the largest B2B platform. Everyone's using it. It's constantly growing every single day. So if you're in the B2B world, that's where you want to start. And then through Sales Navigator, if you're familiar with that, you can start identifying exactly who you want to speak to as far as title, company size, headcount, etc.
Okay. So that's a good overview of LinkedIn, but like what is your process right now to do any lead gen on LinkedIn? Are you doing anything interesting?
Yeah, so it's not just about, you need to reach out to the right people, but you need to reach out in high volume.
Okay. So Mira, let's talk about the other channels you can use for lead generation. What are some of your thoughts on that? What are some of the other channels you can activate for lead generation apart from like traditional LinkedIn kind of outreach?
So first, you want to identify where your market sits. You can begin with mass emailing, move into some LinkedIn lead gen through conversations and adding people. And once those pipelines are generating new business with a stream of incoming new business, you can look into LinkedIn advertising.
Okay, so I have very little experience with LinkedIn ads. Like, I think we ran an ad like once, and the CPC on that was just like ridiculous. So, like, let's dive in. Like, what's so special about LinkedIn ads? What are your thoughts on it? Like, should people be using it?
So LinkedIn Ads is a rather newish platform as compared to, for example, AdWords and other methods of advertising. It's somewhat untapped and not as saturated as other platforms. LinkedIn is the largest B2B platform and growing significantly every single day. So advertising within their ad manager campaign is going to put you in front of a lot of your target market. Now, basically, while you're able to send out about 100 messages a week through your own account, putting some money into LinkedIn advertising will allow you to send that same message to hundreds of people per day, if not thousands of people, depending on your message. Now, the cool thing is, once you go into this type of ad, specifically a messaging ad, it can come out from your profile and be dropped straight into your target market's inbox. Now, once they receive the message, they can glance at your profile, see, is this person credible? And if they're interested in engaging with you, they just click one button, it auto-populates all their information and sends it to you to reach out to them. Then they get funneled to a landing page. So you can continue that engagement as well through traffic. So let's talk about big picture. You want to make sure you have mass email and LinkedIn messaging outreach going, and then build into LinkedIn ads with your budget. Once these pipelines are built, you have a stream of incoming new business, you've got some budget, you can get into content strategy. So content is king, but it takes time and a budget to develop and to begin ranking and growing that following. Let's talk about content strategy. A lot of people just post stuff every single day. Now, here's a few ideas you can go to have purpose with your posting. So let's say you identify 3 to 5 topics that you find are high value to your market, something you can teach them about. You can create a webinar long form content, and from that webinar, edit out a podcast. And then from that same webinar, micro clip 10 to 30 smaller pieces of content, and you have a full social media calendar from the effort of one piece of content. Now, micro content is high value because people have short attention span. So when they land on these micro pieces of content, if it captures their attention, you can then funnel them into your webinar and back to your website and have like a contact us form, for example. Doing this over time will allow you to create one piece of high value content, repurpose it, and build out multiple social media calendars with the effort of one piece of content created.
No, that's great. Like that's what we've done with another client. Like obviously it took a lot of effort. We ended up building a mini team around it. We did 60 YouTube interviews, and then we broke it up into like multiple clips, put them on LinkedIn, and yeah, we also did like repurpose some of that content till this date in our email marketing newsletter. So like you said, we just constantly, I think some of them even got converted into a blog post. So like you're taking one piece of content and like converting into multiple items and going through different mediums and stuff. It's definitely been an interesting challenge. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that, surprisingly. And like my background's not in content at all. We came across as like, because we kind of wanted to experiment with it, and it's been extremely successful. So it's great you talked about that. Do you have any like go-to templates or any like writing, writing guidelines that you kind of adhere by?
Sure. I'll kind of give you an example of some of my own messaging. I like to start with, hey, and then their first name. I'm based out of LA. I used to lead up marketing departments at Hyundai and Fujitsu. Can I share with you how some of my clients are benefiting from certain strategies? And then I put, what's the value proposition if we're trying to get meetings or if we're trying to drive content and engagement?
Okay, cool. And that generally works. Like, cool. Can you share any stats?
Yeah. So then typically people, if there's absolutely no interest, they might say no. But my focus is identifying the people who do have an interest. So if they say yes, or can you tell me a little bit more, I'll basically let them know like, hey, I'm happy to walk you through the blueprints of what my system looks like. Do you want to hop on a call on this day or this day? So it's very quick diving to the point, but let's say for every 100 sendouts, you can expect a handful to convert into meetings, a handful to start building that pipeline of conversation. And then with the remaining few, there's going to be some not interested and some not replying. You want to put a follow-up process where a few weeks later, you touch base and you say, hey, I'm checking on this, to re-engage that conversation.
So tell us a little bit about your lead gen player.
So let's talk about lead gen. People usually focus on their immediate network connections, their first degree network connections, and referral network, which is always your best business. But what happens when you finish talking to all the people all the referrals run dry and client projects start to drop? You need a stream of incoming new business so that you can grow and scale your company.
Okay, cool. That's fair. At Growth Rhino, we do outbound for cold emails. So I guess on your side, you do the same thing, but on LinkedIn, which I find interesting. So let's talk about that. Why specifically volume, and like, is there any like limits or anything like that we need to be aware of?
So high volume with consistency is the key. When you're reaching out to people, not every single person you reach out to is going to have a need or jump into a meeting with you right away. But let's say you're reaching out to 20 people a day. A handful are going to convert and have interest into having a meeting with you. Now imagine you scale that and you reach out to 100 people a day, every single day. You're focused on the handful that are serious and qualified to have a meeting with you. And doing this consistently, you're going to build a calendar of back-to-back meetings for you to build that pipeline of new business.
Okay, that's fair. So essentially hit volume on LinkedIn, try to hit a lot of different people. But like, how does one individual do this? Or is it like, I guess in your agency, do you have a team of people? Like, because like as one individual, you have a certain like capacity, right? Like I can only send out like an X amount of connection requests per day. Like, so what's your, I guess, secret sauce around doing that?
So, all right, let's start with the message. Your first step is figuring out the new targets you want to connect with. and sending them a connection request. And you always want to tack on a little note. So a lot of people get tons of messages every day. So you want to make sure your message stands out. The way to figure out a good message is to A/B test what you're sending. So, for example, create about 5 to 10 intro messages and send them to a handful of people every single day and track the response rate. The data is going to tell you what messages your market is responding to and engaging with. Then you want to take that message and send it out in high volume. So nowadays everyone gets messages. So if your message isn't good, you can reach out to hundreds of people a day and no one will respond. But with the right message, that's where they start getting into meetings with you.
Okay, got it. So really focusing on the messaging. What makes a really good message versus other one, like bad
So
messages?
I find a lot of people try to send out these long generic pitch messages, and really no one wants to be sold to on the receiving end. A lot of people send out paragraphs and paragraphs, and I don't even think a lot of people read through the entire message at that point. So you want to differentiate yourself. You want to create a high value conversation to build a relationship. One way you can do that is kind of keep your message to the point and offer to share strategies. So, for example, I have an extensive background in marketing, but I don't reach out to people and specify that I can build a website or set up an ad or create a video because I don't know what's practical to their scenario right now, since I haven't spoken to them yet. So, what I do is I offer to share strategies that I've seen work with my other clients, geared at building a high value conversation where they stand to gain something. So typically people are more interested in understanding more about strategies that can benefit them. So when they actually accept a meeting and hop into a call, I just dive into what their pain points might be and their immediate goals to better understand where they're at. And then I can position myself as their solution and talk about things practical to their scenario.
Okay, cool. That sounds we've thought about it quite some time. Yeah, messaging on the cold email side is a little bit, I want to say, simpler. We have to kind of get to the point straight away and try to get that conversation started. So we're looking at something that's less than 100 words or so. Why would somebody want to outsource any or like their work to an agency? Like I think for our side, from our side, from Growth Rhino, like we do one very specific service, and like sometimes they just don't want to do that internally, so they outsource it to us. They contract us. Like on the LinkedIn side, like what are some of the like I guess questions and answers you're receiving on your side, saying like to convince the individual, like okay, like I should give you like responsibility on that person's company or personal LinkedIn profiles.
So, I mean, if you're just starting out, these are all strategies that you can do yourself. Now, when your price points are higher or you have high ticket products, at that point, you don't want to spend all your day just chatting with people and building conversations or having your sales team, for example, try to prospect all day. It might be worthwhile at that point to outsource this to an agency who can guide these conversations, get the meetings booked, and plug them into your calendar. That way, you just wake up and take your calls. We can also do this to scale. So while you might be trying to do messaging outreach through your own profile, I can bring on a team of assistants. So imagine, adding 5 or 10 additional profiles to your current setup and doing messaging through that. Instead of sending 20 messages a day, you could set 100, 200, and really scale your operation.
Okay, very interesting. Probably the first person I spoke to that's very passionate about LinkedIn outreach. Again, complete opposite of what we do on the cold email side, but very interesting. Okay, so Mira, tell me, what are your thoughts on LinkedIn automation? Are you for it? Are you against it?
So I'm part for it. I don't like to over automate to where people know it's kind of robotic at that point. I like to maybe automate the first message send out for efficiency. After that, I actually have a team of people who are jumping in and helping guide the conversation. So using, for example, a guided script, if someone asks us, hey, how are you? We're able to say, I'm doing well, how are you? And continue with our guided messaging. That way it's still very personalized.
So Mira, LinkedIn's a very noisy place. Like, what are some tips for people like who are just starting out? Like, just got my first LinkedIn profile. I filled out all the details. I'm going to start doing LinkedIn outreach. Like, what are some tips you have for them? And then I'll follow up with the question like, what do you think some people are doing wrong on LinkedIn? So like, what they shouldn't be doing. So let's hear it.
So basically, once you populate your profile, you definitely want to begin reaching out to people. One thing I advise is just jump into it, add a connection, and send a note with it, engaging them in a direct conversation. So what I find a lot of people doing is they'll, start posting a lot of pictures, but with no real purpose to drive a meeting. So they'll get a lot of engagement, they'll get a lot of attention, but maybe not generate direct meetings from it quickly. It could be over time. So I'd say the fastest way to generate a meeting is to actually get hold of your target market and start the conversation.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Like, do you just in your connection request, are you asking for the meeting straight away, or like what's your playbook here?
So I aim to build a high value conversation. I find a lot of people get millions of messages a day and no responses. And what I mean is people send pitch messages, things they can sell to you directly, and no one wants to be sold to. So what I like to do is kind of introduce myself, where I'm based out of, and what I kind of bring to the table. So for example, I like to offer to share strategies during my calls. And that way, people don't feel pressured that I'm trying to sell them something, but it's also not so detailed to where I might miss the point of the conversation where if it's not practical to the person on the receiving end, they're not going to respond.
How do you scale your LinkedIn engine? Like, with like as one single individual, maybe that's what you do as an agency, but like just maybe give a little bit of visibility from that perspective, right? Because like I think I brought this up before, but like I can only send out an X amount of LinkedIn connection requests per day. That means an individual before I have to go do something. So like, what are your tips on scaling your LinkedIn outreach efforts, or like how would you guys go about it?
So, because each person's limited to sending out from their own profile, LinkedIn caps you at about 100 a week. I like to tack on a team of assistants to really scale the efforts. So, if one profile can send out 20, now imagine I tack on a team of 5 to 10 people and duplicate the efforts, and you're now sending 100 to 200 messages per day. So if you do this every single day, focusing on the handful that convert, and you're sending a couple hundred daily, you're going to have a pipeline of back-to-back meetings getting booked into your calendar over time.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's very similar to what we do in the cold email outreach front. Like when we identify the award-winning messaging, quote unquote, we try to scale out some of the efforts, and we go like a few thousand. We ramp up from like a few hundred per week to a few thousand per week. So very, very interesting. I think it's just a different scale. Mira, thanks so much for being on the show. Really was awesome speaking to you, and I learned so much about LinkedIn, specific LinkedIn outreach. It's not it's a new channel that I think a lot of other people should be exploring.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, awesome.